This episode of Fantastic People is sponsored by Kinetic Realty Services. Kinetic Realty Services exists to help you find home. Their agents understand that home is more than an address. Home is where life happens. It's a place where we experience joy and pain. It's a place where we make memories and build community. Their agents see more than a transaction or a file number. They see the person or family that home represents. Kinetic Realty Services executive sales agents manage the home buying or selling process with care. Kinetic Realty Services strives to provide timely communication, technical excellence, and tailored information for each customer and each home, making sure that from search to close, your home transaction is joyful and professional. Start your home buying or selling process today at kineticrs.com/info. Again, that's kineticrs.com/info. Licensed in Florida and Alabama, Kinetic Realty Services, helping real estate investors find success and helping individuals and families find home.
Welcome back to Fantastic People. I'm Christian.
And I'm Regan, and here with us today is a very special guest, all the way from the Northwest Washington State area, originally from Southern California, but also spending some time in the Pensacola area, is Stephanie Busby. Stephanie works in the mortgage lending industry and has also been recognized for both direction and performance of musicals on the state and national level, and in competitions and performance of musical theater. So, Stephanie, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Doing excellent.
I'm doing all right.
You're doing all right.
It's a pretty good day.
It is.
It's good. It's good. It's a clear day here, which is great.
It's not here.
No. Oh, wait, it's clear over there? Is it ever?
Yes.
I didn't know it was ever a clear day out in that area.
It's like 5% of the time, and those couple of days is when you got to get out and get on the trail, go to the water. That's when you got to go. Make the most of it.
Okay, and the rest are movie days, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, you still get out, I'm sure.
I do. I've got rain gear, and right now it's just cold. A lot of the trails are shut down because it's winter. We had landslides a couple of weeks ago. Ugh. It's a whole new ball game as far as coming from Florida to the West Coast out here. So it's interesting, though.
For sure. It's amazing. A lot of people we've had on this podcast, mostly because we know them from this area, no longer live here. And always they're like, man, it's like such a culture shock. It's so different, geographically. And I went through the same thing when I moved out west, and it is like a whole different ball game. Like, we were talking to a girl who lives in Boston, and it's like you don't even have a wardrobe if you're from Florida that can be okay up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned about what's really winter wear in the couple of months I've been here and what's not.
Yeah, that is the big difference.
Well, so speaking of, tell us a little bit, if you can, about that. You haven't been in that area very long, and so what inspired you to make? I mean, literally cross country.
Well, and it's really funny because it kind of does relate to what we're going to talk about today, because the Pacific Northwest, while the West has always been my home, no matter how long I lived in Florida, I was always like SoCal for life. Like, that's just been the mountains call to me. So I have like several things that, I always tell Jake anytime we travel, my husband, like, mountains, Gandalf. Like, that's what I'll say anytime I see them. Like, they speak to me.
That's awesome.
But also, like, the Pacific Northwest just was as similar to New Zealand as we could get almost in the U.S.
It's awesome.
And it's just a beautiful place to be. Like I said, mountains, it's just beautiful. Like, it really exceeded everything I thought it was going to be. And we kind of did this blindly, living in Florida, only traveling out here a couple of times to see some relatives, and then spending a lot of time on Zillow. And then I know you guys are supported by Kinetic Realty, and I just really wanted to give them a shout out because they were my party in Florida that helped me. And they were literally the best thing and the only thing that went right with that process. And it was definitely a journey getting out here, but totally worth it. And we live off the Puget Sound, where we get the chance to see orca and seals and wildlife and trails. And it's awesome. I mean, like I said, it's winter, so not everything's open, but where we are, I'm really excited when the spring comes to really just get out and drive and hike and be outdoors.
Yeah,
I didn't really want to do that in Florida. Wasn't for me.
No, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I will be honest. When I think of that area,
You think of the movie Twilight.
no,
Hey, that's
actually,
where Forks. It's a
I
little way down.
should, but it's going to be really, really bizarre. I can't remember the name of the TV show, but it got picked up by Netflix. It's really intense show, and it's in, I think it's set in Seattle, and like almost all the time, it's raining, and
Yeah.
so on the show, and I'm like, that just seems like dreary and boring, but that's because the tone of that show was supposed to be
Yeah.
heavier, darker, a
Yeah,
little
and it's
sad
not
at
really like
times.
that.
No, and so I see you share pictures, and I'm like, "Wow, I really need to get out there. Like,
Yeah.
I'm missing out. It's beautiful."
Interesting factoid about the rain in the Pacific Northwest is everyone relates it. Seattle's people claim it to be the rainiest city in America. Mobile, Alabama, actually has more days of rain
I'll
than
believe that.
Seattle.
That is an interesting fact.
Yeah,
There's
and
so many microclimates here that, like, where we are so close to the water that you'd think we'd get snow and lots of cold temperatures, but we haven't dropped below like mid-30s. But there's some areas that don't get more than 3 inches of rain the entire year here, and that's just north of Seattle, so it's crazy.
Interesting.
Climate's so weird. I lived in Alaska for a while, and
Neat.
like when in Alaska, this part makes sense. The southern part is warmer than the northern part, but that's true in the winter, but it's not true in the summer. The northern part of Alaska gets hotter than the southern part of Alaska. There are parts of Alaska that never get snow. It's like 45 and rainy every day, all year round.
Wow.
It's just so, it's just so weird, especially coming from a place where it's 100, 280 days out of the year.
Yeah.
And sunny.
Yeah, it's definitely a switch. I mean, my husband was saying he was coaching football out in 20-degree weather, and he's used to Florida, humidity, and it's 80 degrees, but it feels like 95 and you're sweating, and it's a shock coming out here. Like I said, I'm so excited for the summer because I hated the humidity in Florida. So I'm just like, this is going to be that West Coast, kind of cool climate I've been waiting for so long. So
I think you're in for a real treat. I think you'll really enjoy the summer out there.
Yeah,
That's all.
for sure.
So we kind of hinted at this already. There have been little clues mixed into the conversation so far.
Not at all.
But what are you a fan of? What are we here to discuss today?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
The epic tale of Lord of the Rings.
Are you a movie person, book person, both?
Both, because they came out, the movies were coming out at the same time that I was getting involved. So I'm a Harry Potter kid. I was always waiting for my owl to come with my letter.
For
Still
sure.
am.
Yep.
That guy got lost. I'm sure of it. But around the time that I was transitioning out of that into more mature literature and the movies were going to come out, I was that kid who was like, I have to read it first. The books are always better. I need to know what's going on, what's different. So I started getting involved in the books, and I did not read the Silmarillion or Hobbit, which typically I'm really adamant about reading in order. But I went straight to the Lord of the Rings knowing that was what was coming out. And I am such a fan of anything that's got more than one book that's sci-fi or fiction. I love a good trilogy, something like The Sword of Truth that's got 12, 15 books. I don't even remember how many are in that series.
Wow.
So the more books, the better in my mind. But it was just right up that alley. And Tolkien is just so fantastic of a writer. I don't think I've really experienced writing like that until I got to the Game of Thrones series, in my personal opinion. Or the Sword of Truth series, but I really wouldn't put that series on the same level. But anyways, that just all came out at the same time. So they're all connected to me. And I envision Frodo as Elijah Wood, just because that's what happened. But I did read the books before the movies came out. I was just fascinated by both. As I'm a music person, so that plus all of the cinematography, and then having visited New Zealand at one point in time, just connected it all, and I was just hooked. So yeah, they're one and the same to me, but I know there's some things that I like about the movie that I don't like about the book, and there's some things that I think they do better, but yeah, they're always going to be entwined for me.
I'm going to enjoy this conversation because I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan.
Yep.
Yes.
I have read the books probably 15 times.
Wow, I did not know
Wow,
that. Now,
yeah.
I do know that you mentioned when I was reading the book, like every year, but I didn't actually think about the fact how many times do I hear that?
Since like
Mm.
I haven't done it every year. I haven't been able to do it consistently, but I first experienced The Hobbit in 2001, I believe. I saw a stage production version of The Hobbit.
Really? Oh, cool.
And immediately like went home. Was like, I have to read this book, and then came out. And that was 2001. And since then, yeah, the latest reread I did was the fall of 2020, and it had been a couple years prior to that. But
Okay.
I love the books. I love the films. I will say. This is a controversial opinion. I don't really enjoy the Silmarillion.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I'm there with you. To
It's,
me, it's like reading parts of the Bible where it's like, and he was the
Yes,
son of Samuel, and he
100%.
was the son of Jacob.
I was just about to say it's like reading Leviticus.
Now, my husband, who's a historian, that is one of his favorites.
That's cool,
Because
yeah.
he likes to get into the time frames
Yeah.
and all that, and really into the history. And I'm just like, that is the most boring thing you could ever put in front of me.
This is gonna
But
be fun.
respect.
Yep.
Confession.
Yeah.
I've never read the books.
You're not much of a reader.
That's not true.
You've gotten better.
Okay.
What kind of books do you read, Reagan?
I mean, I've read Harry Potter.
What was your last book?
That's mostly the last 2 years. It's been Star Wars.
Yeah.
All Star Wars.
Okay. All right. Yep.
All
right.
But
Well, okay. So confession, being on here as a fan, I haven't read the book since my honeymoon, which was 6 years ago.
Oh.
So it's been a hot second for me since I've read them. And then when we talked about it, I was like, I don't have time to read that before this.
Yeah.
well, and I will say though, so I did go back and obviously watch the movies. I stretched it out over like 6 or 7 days, but I watched, the 3 movies, finished it today. Woohoo. And doing that, I mean, that was my first time actually watching the movies as like a mature person, not like a little kid or young young teenager. And what it did is it inspired me to want to go back and read the books because I saw so many moments, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but where I was like, man, that seems like there's so much more to that, or so much more in between those 2 little chunks we just got, or they really fast forwarded through that little section. It seems like if I read the book, it's deeper, richer.
Always
I would enjoy it.
Always.
Which I do feel like,
Yeah.
From what I've heard, they did a fantastic job of capturing more so than some movie to book or movie from books do. But so that's why I've never really felt the desire to read them before, because I thought, there's plenty of other books that are not, movies, or I've seen the story, I know it, I don't need to read it. But this time around, I'm between now and 2022, I'll probably read the books.
I would say this is probably the best book to movie adaptation. And the reason why is they're very, very faithful in a lot of things, but they also they switch some order around of some things, and it actually, I think, works better. So like, for example, Gandalf and Frodo's conversation in the Mines of Moria, that actually happens like in the Shire before Frodo leaves. But it's so much more powerful in that moment where they're sitting there lost in the mines and Gollum's right behind them. Like,
right.
So I think you'll see a lot of differences, but I think you'll learn to appreciate the differences in both situations.
Well, and I know that
I agree with that.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, I will say that I've decided that if I'm ever going to read a book that's been made into a movie, I'm going to watch the movie first.
Ooh.
Because
I also have the same reaction of I.
Well, many times, because anytime I've done it the other way around, I felt like the movie was terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that was trash.
All right.
But anytime I've done it where I have seen a movie and I found out, that was a book, I go back and read the book, and I still recognize the book is better, but I still appreciate the movie.
See, my only thing with that is that I feel like then you're just limiting your imagination when you do read to what that screenwriter and director has given to you.
That's a good point.
And
yep. What's his
like
name?
Ender's Game for me was ruined by that movie, and I think you get so much more appreciation for Ender's Game when you read that book and you envision the weightlessness and them going through those battles. And
That's a good
those are
point.
things that I think are just so much more intense when you think about them as you're reading.
That's a good point. Daniel Radcliffe is forever Harry Potter for me, because when I read I started reading the book, the first movie came out before I finished. So I watched the movie, and then I could never replace what was in my head.
So while we're on that topic, and we'll get back to Lord of the Rings, so there's plenty, but I think talking about book to screen adaptations is a valid conversation to go along with this, because again, I do think it's probably the best. You brought up Harry Potter, so I have to ask, Stephanie, what's your opinion of Half-Blood Prince? Because it's the most controversial one, I think.
Sidestep.
Ah, man, I did not prep for a Harry Potter conversation.
It's just the one that I've argued the most about, because it's, I think, the least faithful book.
I'll tell you what, I feel that after the Triwizard Tournament, those movies just go downhill.
Oh, okay.
And they get less and less faithful to the books. They chop more and more up. More and more of it has to be pulled and kind of sewn together to make the plot still work. And I think we lose so much of it after that point that it gets lost in translation. So honestly, after the fourth book and the fourth movie, I kind of lose faith and love with the Harry Potter movie series.
Interesting. Yeah, that one's it's a tough one. I think they're good movies, but yeah, gosh, they're just so different.
They're entertaining. And I love that my nephew's getting into them right now, and that's been great. But yeah, that's another one where I'm going to say the book all the way on those.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, then follow up to that. How do you feel about the Hobbit films?
Ooh. I did not watch The Hobbit prior to this, because those were too utterly faithful, I feel like. And I am very much a traditionalist, so it's kind of funny that looking up kind of what's coming up next for Lord of the Rings and their future and how I feel about that, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later, but I don't want to spend most of my time in the theater listening to them sing while they're walking through the forest.
Yeah.
And I kind of let myself have this. I didn't reread the books prior. I didn't go too much into the trailers or reading about the movies. I really wanted to just go and enjoy what they had created, because I was a little tense about it, having Lord of the Rings come out. And then I know they're going to try and do the same thing and make it look the same and give it the same feel. And those things always make me a little bit tense, because The Hobbit's such a different style of story.
It is, yeah.
And it was presented in a different way when Tolkien wrote it originally, and then was adjusted for The Lord of the Rings after he made it a big, massive series. And I also remember it originally as like the animated version, so there's that little cute thing in it. But I got really upset sitting in the theater, like, are you kidding? We're through the first movie and I don't get to see Smaug.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I just sat here listening to for like an hour and a half, and that's not what I wanted. I was really upset with The Hobbit, like, not gonna lie. Yeah.
No, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I greatly dislike The Hobbit movies.
I'm gonna go back and watch them. I didn't watch the third one. I never saw the third one. I think I saw the second one, but only half of it.
The second one is the best one of the three.
I fell asleep.
Yeah.
You
fell asleep. Yeah, that sums it up right there.
I think it was that one, and because that's where they do fight Smaug, right?
They don't fight him. Well, they do. The dwarves do, but there's nothing comes of it. Like,
right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I just remember. So we had just come off of our honeymoon. Why this happened, I have no idea. My wife's parents pick us up from the airport.
Take you immediately to the theater.
Yeah, and it's like, and it wasn't like an early flight in. It was like a 8-9 o'clock flight in, and we had just exhausted ourselves. Been up
I was
all
probably
day
working
flying,
at the theater.
probably.
Yeah,
and like we talked about wanting to go see it, and then they pick us up like, you guys want to go see a movie? And we were like, we'll buy it. All right. And so then, like,
we love you, family.
Halfway through, I just couldn't keep my eyes open. And I've been tired through a lot of movies. When it's so good if it keeps me awake. And this one just couldn't. I just gave up.
I do have a rule about movie to book adaptations, which is if I can read the book faster than I can watch the movie's bad.
Yeah,
that's good.
Agreed.
That's a good point.
And that's true for The Hobbit.
That's a good point. Well, I'll probably get through it pretty slow as I embark on this journey the next few days.
So Stephanie, I did want to kind of get back more on track. what is it about the Lord of the Rings? What are the traits that you think really draw you and so many other people? Because it does have such a huge fan base.
I mean, and I think a lot of it comes again from the fact that they came out, the movies and the book, at the same time for me specifically. Because The Hobbit came out in 1937, and then The Fellowship came out in 1954. So obviously, I don't have any connection to them originally coming out in book form, and I didn't have any realization that they existed until the movies were coming out. But they're just, as a fiction and fantasy lover in general, it is the most epic story. It has the most complete languages, the most complete lands. It has different people. It has it's just massive. It's a massive work. He spent 40 years of his life writing it, and it shows. It's not something that someone kind of put together a little chart and we've got one or two families and maybe something happened 30 to 500 years ago, and that's about it. Like, we have thousands of years of history that he builds on, and it's just such a rich text. And there's all these themes that you always love in any type of epic story, which is you've got the small unknown dude who becomes the epic hero who overcomes the big story. We know that, blah, blah, blah. But the friendship that you have between Frodo and Sam, which, as we're talking about movie adaptations, let's just state right up front, Sam never, ever turned his back on Frodo in the books. Ever. There is never a moment where there was that, Gollum came in between them and they doubted each other. That didn't happen. And so that's even purer in the books than it is in the movie. But you also just have people coming together to fight evil. And then you also have, Reagan, I saw your Facebook post on this, that massive score by Howard Shore, which to me as a musician, anytime you have a score that just complements what you're watching, it only intensifies that.
Yeah.
So I was hooked on the music as well as the themes. And then I'm just a major fantasy lover. So anytime you're going to include wizards and crazy, wargs and balrogs, and it was just the richest thing I think I'd gotten into as a reader at that time, and fell head over heels.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It certainly, there are just stories that we love being told, and the classic good versus evil. I mean, I once read this thing that the perception of cliches being bad is what's bad. Cliches themselves are not bad, and they're cliches for a reason. And it's because there are these attributes of storytelling that appeal to mass amounts of people across generations, and they never go out of style. And so the chosen one story, the classic good versus evil, and even,
but we always want that for ourselves,
very true.
And like I was saying, it was in middle school that really hit me, and those are the formative times of your life. Especially, I'm always going to speak as a musician. Anything you were listening to when you were in middle school, that's going to be your jam forever. Like that just sticks with you, and that's chemicals. And so I feel like at the same time, obviously what I was reading and taking in visually as well with the movies is always going to stick with you. And that's just going to always hit those funny bones in the back of your heart, kind of thing. But who doesn't want to be that connection to that hero of somebody who's just like me, some regular old Joe who's going to overcome it? And at a time in high school when you feel like you're overcoming everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to Mount Doom. This is my Mount Doom. It sounds crazy, but that's what, we all, I think that we connect to, wanting to be that regular person who's called to something greater. We always want that.
I think we need it.
So who doesn't get hooked? Oh yeah, for sure. If we don't have a purpose, what are we here for?
Well,
I think we've all felt that through COVID.
Absolutely.
What are we doing? What are we here for? Yeah.
It was funny. We keep bringing up the score. I was a music major in college. I know Reagan was for a while as well, kind of ish.
Halfway.
And I don't know a single music major from like our generation who doesn't have a deep love for Howard Shore's score for The Lord of the Rings. It's like the most common thing among music. Like if you were to go into and I say this as a person, we're talking a decade ago, so like 2010, and you were to go into a music building somewhere, someone is playing it and or listening to it.
Well,
oh yeah, him and John Williams of our generation. They are the music that we grew up to, and I think we will always always hear them.
Well,
Go
and
ahead.
I think they unknowingly, and maybe this was their intention in their works, but they, to me, inspired a new generation of people that appreciate the classical style of music and the
Mm-hmm.
orchestra, because um otherwise you think of, ancient dead people that compose this boring music, you know,
Right.
so long
We have
ago.
Fantasia. Like that came out when we
Yeah.
were young,
Yeah.
Fantasia. And that was something that, and even cartoons for us, those were all classical
Mhm.
songs behind our morning
Yeah.
cartoons.
Yeah. And
And when we were talking about doing the podcast and I really was leaning on soundtracks originally, it's something that I think a lot of people, doesn't matter where you come from. If you've watched a movie, if you have a favorite movie, you've got a favorite soundtrack. Like
Mhm.
you've experienced
Yeah.
that soundtrack and how you enjoy that movie. Listen to any horror movie without a soundtrack. It's less interesting for sure,
Yeah. Well, one of my
So
favorite things that in college that I got to witness, I guess, as an audience member, Professor Glaze. I doubt he's listening to this, but hey, cool if he is.
he
Um,
is. He
he
is out
he,
there.
um, he would do once a year. They did a concert of it was like movie music. That's all it was.
Mhm.
And of course, Lord of
They
the
do
Rings
it
was
every
there.
year.
Yeah, they do it every year still.
Mhm.
And I mean, to me, he did that on purpose, and he taught it as a I think he also taught it as like a elective humanities, that people that weren't music majors could take that course. Um, and I would talk to students all the time. And they're like, "Oh, that's," it just opened their eyes to
Oh yeah,
classical
get him
music.
hooked.
And he did that on purpose because he knew it was movies that they
Mhm.
had seen and grown up with. So
Right.
super, super
Smart
cool.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we may have talked about this already, but I want to get a little bit more into it. When did you first discover that you were a true fan of Lord of the Rings?
Oh man, middle school. I started for the first time writing fan fiction with Lord of the
Mm.
Rings.
Mhm. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you still have
And
it?
I had a I don't know. Having just moved, there's a lot
Oh.
of like, especially books that are packed away. I know I've taken it out several times and looked at it. And I had several girlfriends that were close girlfriends in high school, and we still know each other through Facebook and stuff. But we would write it together, and we'd kind of pass it around, or we write little bits of this, and we would stay up late at night and have sleepovers, and everybody had a boyfriend, and of course Frodo was mine. And
That sounds like the nerdiest thing I've ever heard in my life, but I love it.
Oh,
I
for
love it. It's
sure.
awesome.
I will claim nerdom all the way. I mean, I am not here to shy away from that at all.
No, don't.
All the way. I'm here for it, but yeah, I know it started out with something like magic dripping from her blade
Wow.
or something,
Oh,
like
wow.
so intense.
Not the direction I was expecting. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was super fun. But that's when I was like, wow, thank goodness I had friends that participated in that, because
Yeah.
it would have been just me at the lunch table writing about my love of Frodo in the Shire. And it would have gotten really awkward really quick.
Yeah.
But I had people to be awkward with me, thankfully. But I think that's when I was like, more than Harry Potter, I never really wrote fan fiction for Harry Potter. But for some reason, Lord of the Rings, like I said, is just massive. And I just wanted to be a part of that. And I was a big daydreamer. Still am. I mean, I'm an artist by trade, so that's kind of what I like to do on a main basis. But I would daydream all day about that, and I would just sit and listen to the soundtracks and think of that landscape and think of other books that I'd read, and very visual with my books and my reading, and just kind of rehashing that. Which I think leans on my musicality a little bit more, just because I rehash that music and the scenes for that kind of enjoyment. But yeah, the moment I was like passing it around the table, like, okay, add a chapter. Where do you want to go next? What's our next adventure? Like, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm there. And then it just progressed as I got older. My parents moved around a lot with my dad working for the military, and I was very lucky to get to travel with them. And so they were stationed in Australia at one point, and I got to go there and do a little hop over to New Zealand. And having been the filming location for The Lord of the Rings, like just made it stick even harder.
Mhm.
And then eventually went and did my honeymoon, where I did specifically Lord of the Rings themed things, because of course on my family trip, I'm like, let's go down this really random road for like 20 miles so I can see this forest, and Gollum caught a fish there and I'd really like a picture. So,
That's awesome.
you know, my parents like rolling their eyes like, okay. The most I got out of that trip was I did get my Lord of the Rings ring that was in silver, not gold. I'm not a gold fan. But and I've worn that ever since that trip. And that's something that I keep too, just as a reminder of traveling and always enjoying and being present where I go. And also I just love Lord of the Rings, and it's always been there.
That's awesome.
That's super cool. So the honeymoon, how did that, like, what inspired you to do that, number one? And I mean, did you get ideas from somewhere, or you just put it together because you were already such a big fan?
Well, I have to think about that a little bit, because my husband is also a huge Lord of the Rings fan, although he really didn't get into it kind of like you, Christian, until around like 2001, something around there, like after a lot of that had already kind of come out and been established with the movies and everything. And he got into The Hobbit first before he read The Fellowship of the Ring and the trilogy. But he was a huge fan of it, and I had traveled there and, like I said, hadn't gotten to do Lord of the Rings things. And I was like, you know what, if we're having a honeymoon, it's the one time we're going to get the most time off of work. I want to do something that's a great adventure and something that we really both like. My husband really hadn't traveled out of the South. He's born and raised, you know, in the Panhandle. So he'd had like 1 or 2 trips outside of the South, once to California, really liking the mountains. And I was like, okay, I want to do a big journey with him as our first like marital act together. Yeah. And he had a love of Lord of the Rings. And so I was like, you know, it'd be really cool if we could do something themed like that. And it just happened that I love digging into stuff like that and doing some research. And we found a site called Honey Fund, where you can ask people to donate towards your trip, because we had furniture from college and roommates and siblings. And, you know, we were moving in together. We didn't need furniture. We wanted an experience. And so our family members got to purchase different things for us, whether they knew they were Lord of the Rings based or not, you know, and they got to purchase an experience for us. And so it's really cool because it funded our entire honeymoon. We didn't have to pay a dime for it, really. And we got to go do something amazing and totally geek out the entire time.
That's cool.
I will say, what I find really funny though, no one paid for our skydiving. We did have to pay for that for ourselves. I'll note that. No one wanted to fund that adventure.
Yeah. But that was like skydiving over
the Fox Glacier. Wow. I told my husband that if I was ever going to skydive, because I'd never done it before, if I was ever going to do it, it had to be over the most beautiful place I'd known in the world, which was New Zealand. And that's where we did it. That's awesome. Which is a very interesting experience as well, to just get married and then see your new husband
fall out of a plane,
slip out of the plane. Yeah. Bye. Hope I see you on the ground. I love you. Bye.
That's cool. Yeah. What's, just because I'm curious, what's the most memorable Lord of the Rings thing of that trip? I mean, because you've seen some of it in middle school, you know, but on this trip, did you do something that you didn't get to do before, or that you just was iconic Lord of the Rings?
Okay, so I have to give you a couple, just because, I mean, we did so much in the 10 days that we were there. I really gave him a very brutal schedule, and I didn't really get to do anything Lord of the Rings based previously on that initial trip there. Mount Doom, we went to Tongariro National Park, where basically Mordor is, and it's just a very impressive landscape. And then to see the mountain that was Mount Doom. And we were planning to actually climb the mountain, but that day there were like 60 to 70 mile per hour winds. So it was not safe to go out. So I sat very sulkingly in the camper van that day, watching Lord of the Rings instead of hiking Lord of the Rings. And then we also had the Waitomo Caves, which are the glowworm caves there. That's a spot where they've done filming. They also did recording there because of the acoustics, which was totally magical. It's blackwater rafting. So you go down deep, you rappel into the caves, you like get to see all the glowworms. And then we had to climb up a waterfall out of it. And that was super cool. I mean, I felt very like Gollum-like down in there, you know? And then the other one was just the tours in Wellington, because they did so many different filming locations there. Like this scene where you see the Nazgul come up on the road and they're all hiding underneath the tree and he's sniffing for the ring. We reenacted that. Which I will say, okay, if you're going to go on those tours, which is Lord of the Rings tours, do it.
Yeah, you got to get in there.
Put on the elf. Put on the elf ears. And stand where Legolas stood and shoot your arrow. But just shoot the arrow. Do that. That's what the experience is. And me and my husband are the only people to be like, yeah, I will totally do it. I've seen this poster. It's been in my room since I was like a child. Cool. I will totally stand like Legolas right there.
That's super dope.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that tour was awesome, because that's also like Wilmington was where they had Isengard, which is a cool disc golf area. If you ever go there, play some disc golf in Isengard.
Play some disc golf in Isengard, no big deal.
Yeah. So anytime when we were watching that this last weekend, we saw the film, I was like, 4! Just someone throwing that through. And then they also filmed like Helm's Deep at a mine there. So that was a really cool location. That had a lot of really neat spots. And the Weta workshop is there, which we saw. You can't take pictures in, which stinks because it was just so fantastic to see. But yeah, those were the favorites.
Regan, have you ever done like a movie or TV tour?
Well, I have, but
well, you did yourself one.
I did my own. Yeah. I've never done like a actual like touristy version.
Well, tell people what you did.
No, I did. So we went to New York City a few years ago now, 5 years ago maybe. And it was for Christmas, but I think on the way there, I don't know what inspired me to do this, but, at the time, all the Marvel and Netflix TV shows were like out, like just initially released. So super popular. I'd watched 2, maybe 3 of those. And I was like, they're all based in New York City. So how cool would it be to go to different spots for filming? So like on the bus, where like we had just arrived, and I'm like Googling all these different spots and like laying out. I laid it out poorly, by the way. It's supposed to all be in Hell's Kitchen, but it's actually not all in Hell's Kitchen. And yeah, I spent the day. My wife Chelsea was not interested in doing it. She hadn't seen the shows, so she went and did some things with her friend and her friend's mom, and I met them back at the end of the day. You were
just zooming across the subway all over the city.
Yeah, I was zooming across the subway. I mean, I'd get
running across traffic.
I'd get to a spot and then I'd like take it in for a second. This is really cool. Take a selfie and then on to the next, because it was literally like every corner of New York City. And the way that I laid it out, I didn't know any. I mean, I just didn't know.
You didn't know.
Like, next place is this. Get on this train and go here. And then before you know it, I'm like 15 minutes on the subway to the next section. But that was super cool, just to see like, oh, that's where he like killed that one guy, or that's that one where that bus flipped over. Sure. Like, and there's some cool stuff that's in New York City. And so I was, I was seeing all of New York City while I'm doing this. Funny story though. Yeah. The last thing, so we're supposed to go to, I think it was Phantom of the Opera. I think it was just me and my wife, or maybe I was supposed to meet them. It was for some show, and we had to get ready. And I did not time this very well. And the last place to go was was Nelson and Murdoch's office, which is like way across town from where our hotel was. Got on the subway and got on the wrong train.
What happens?
Went the wrong direction first. So I was like, oh, shoot. All right, get back on the other train. Got to the place. Then going back, got on the wrong train. And like literally went to the farthest corner at the last stop, because that was it. There was no stops in between. Had to get back on. I was like a nervous wreck, because I'm like, shoot, I've got to be back at the hotel in like 20 minutes. And it took me like 45 minutes just to get back to the hotel. And I saw a lot of crazy, a lot of stuff on the subway. It was entertaining, but it was really cool.
Did you make it to Phantom of the Opera?
I did.
Okay.
I still don't think it was. I think
mission accomplished.
It might have been.
Wicked.
Might have been the The Rockettes.
Actually. That was. Well, I would not want to.
How do you get the Rockettes and Phantom of the Opera?
Because we saw so much. We saw so many shows. Okay.
All right.
My memory tells me it was Phantom of the Opera, but the next memory I have of that night was like sweating, and of course this was December, so I shouldn't have been sweating, but I was like running in
to see the Rockettes
to get there on time and
talking. Get into costume and on stage. I get it.
Talking to my wife and our friends. So heels. I don't know. That's the next memory I have, but that was the night of the Rockettes show. So I don't know what happened.
I have never done an official movie tour. I have.
Oh, you need to.
I
Yeah.
do. I
fun.
do
It's
need
so
to.
cool.
I recently was in Georgia and driving through the town of Sonoya, which they film a bunch of things like Driving Miss Daisy and stuff was filmed there. But famously,
Okay.
it's where they made Walking Dead season 3. So it's where like the governor was. If you
Wow.
watch The Walking Dead, and the only other time I've ever done it, and this one much more personal because I really hate The Walking Dead. I can't get into it. But I was driving through the North Shore of Oahu. It's just me and like 3 friends. We're driving through Hawaii, and we come to this YMCA camp. And I'm like, I've been here before.
Deja vu. Yeah.
Yeah, just having serious, like, I know where I am.
But
And then
it
it
was-
hit me. This is the others camp from Lost.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
crazy.
Yep.
Wow.
And then it's actually,
What a great series and also disappointing at the same time.
Yeah.
I love Lost. I stand by the ending. It's
No.
good.
Another
It's
episode.
good. It's
Another
just so. Oh, man.
One side of the street, the others camp. When you go across the other side of the street, it's literally the beach where where their camp is.
That's awesome.
Like where they crash landed.
That's great. Yeah, that's cool.
Nice.
But yeah, that's my only real experience
Yeah,
with
I
the
would-
movie set thing.
Anybody listening who's getting the idea to do this, I do recommend do your research way in advance. Not only
Oh,
because
yeah,
of like
for sure.
logistically planning out your most efficient travel, but also, especially in New York City, you can wind up in the wrong part of town.
Oh,
really
yeah, yeah,
fast. And,
Oh, real quick.
at least twice on that tour, I started to be like, oh man, I should not be.
I need to
alone.
get back on the train.
Yeah,
I'll
and
tell you what, though.
Well, and it started the last one. It was definitely the last stop was the wrong part of town, completely wrong part of town, and it was starting to get dark on the way back, and I was like, I really got to hurry. Like
Yeah.
this is not. I just got that vibe. Like I am no
This is
longer.
not the place.
I got to get out of here.
Yeah. No, listen, New Zealand does a really good job on their actual like country's website for tourism. They have itineraries. And so I pulled from that. But yeah, definitely do your research. Like I mapped out like time between destinations, and we were driving from like North and South Island, which is like a crazy distance. But like kudos to the tourism site for New Zealand for being so on top of that, because they definitely bring a lot of people into that country for Lord of the Rings.
That's why I would
do a really good job. Oh yeah.
What keeps you coming back? What keeps you revisiting the films or rereading the books?
I mean, it like I said, it just came at a really formative time for me, and I haven't found anybody that's got the same kind of meat. It's legit language that he's created. It's a solid read. I mean, there's times, granted, okay, so I'm reading and we're talking about the third bush to the left of Frodo and Mordor and how dry and ragged it is. And let's look forward. And there's another bush in front of Frodo. There's some tedious moments for sure in there, but there's just, it's a whole complete world that you really don't get in a lot of fantasy. I haven't seen in a lot of fantasy reading. And I've tried a lot of different series, and there's a lot of pretenders out there. Which, what is it? Jordan Brown's Wheel of Time series.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? The very first book I picked up, and it was basically hobbits and hiding jewelry. And I was like, nope, we're done. Sorry. It's already been done. It's been done.
Yeah.
But it's also something that it came out at Christmas time. So it's always something I watch at Christmas.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's become like a nostalgic part. Same thing with Harry Potter, because that always came out in December as well. But that always came out at that time. And I saw those movies religiously when they came out. Like I'm talking like 7-8 times each in theater.
Oh,
I dressed up for them. I was Frodo one time. I had hairy feet and I had a cape that I made. My mom was a sewer, and so she taught me. I made my cape, and I mean, I was all in. And I, like I said, saw them multiple times in theater. So every Christmas, it's something that I want to watch. And the score as a musician is something that I listen to all the time. It's on like what I call my soundtrack porn. It's just something that I listen to religiously. And so it always seems to pop up somewhere. Yeah.
I have before we get to
I
the
was gonna
last
say
section,
something I forgot. But
I did have kind of like a brief lightning round because I'm curious to hear of your answers. I think everyone has answers to these questions. So
Okay.
we're ready.
Go ahead.
Favorite character?
Ooh. Yeah, I have to go with Sam. He is the hero. I mean, Frodo seems to be it, but he really is the one who makes it happen.
Yep.
He's the one that stands there the whole time. He gets Frodo there. He carries him on his back.
Yep, I can't.
He
carry
never
you.
succumbs to the ring.
I can't carry you, Mr. Frodo, or I can't carry the ring for you, Mr. Frodo, but I can carry.
But I can carry you.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a great line. Do you have a favorite character?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, it was Legolas, just because I liked being the.
It's common.
I don't know
That's
why I
common
like the archer. I don't know why I like being the archer, and thought that was cool. And
he's got the nice slim hair.
Super pale guy. I'm super pale guy. I like
Ladies
my hair.
love him.
Yeah,
Archer.
Yeah. But going back and watching it now, I would probably say Sam as well. Like the story, the plot, the whole thing doesn't happen multiple times without Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was big on Aragorn growing up, but now I would say the counter to that, Boromir.
Really?
Yep.
Why? I find that so interesting. Why Boromir?
I think Boromir is the most human character. Boromir has absolutely good intentions.
Right.
But he's very misguided. And I think this is a really good description of maybe the world we kind of live in now. We see around us, like, tribalism is probably super intense, and that word's thrown out a lot. But a lot of it is, a lot of times we accept faults in ourselves and in our leaders for gain. So whether that be like, there's obviously in politics, there's not a perfect person in politics. But we feel such the need to defend our guy in spite of our problems. And that's Boromir. Boromir wants good for his people so much that he's like, okay, yeah, I hear you guys, there's a risk, but you're not the ones facing Mordor every day. I am.
Right.
And and
he's probably more who we really are. I mean, he's who we would be in the story. We're not probably, as much as we want to be Sam or Frodo, really making it to Mount Doom. We'd probably be Boromir.
Absolutely. And that's why I feel that. Because at the time, I want to view myself as the hero, but now reading it as an adult, I like finding the person who is me. And I also think it's the lesson Boromir learns, and albeit learns it at the very end, is the lesson I need to learn and that other people need to learn. And I just think Tolkien was so ahead of his time with that character.
Oh, yeah. That was.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Some of the changes that they made to the movies were to kind of hit on that point a couple more times. So like Faramir in the books, he always helped Frodo.
Yeah. Yep.
And destroy the ring. But in the movies, he has doubts about who Frodo is and what he's doing there and who Gollum is and his purpose. And that's another moment that they changed to kind of show you that greed of man. And like you said, I have a reason. I have something valuable to me. And so it's, of course, important that I take this on for my cause. That's important, and that's one change there. And then the Ents seeing the destruction of Saruman on the forest, that's something that didn't happen in the books. And they take him all the way off course to see the actual destruction that's happened to the forest. Why they do that's a totally different discussion, because that's totally pointless in the books anyways. But like, that's another moment that they show, like, we may not feel what's happening, and what a interesting time to be living through it now if you haven't experienced the pandemic. But sometimes we don't realize how important a cause is until we've experienced up front.
Absolutely.
And so in the book, the Ents are just kind of like, yeah, no, totally. We'll take care of this. No problem. But there's that moment. And
that sounds like
the thing that's probably most different if you decide to go and read the book is the Sauron. I mean, how Sauron is treated is so real different.
Let's face that up front too, because in the movies, and this ticks my husband off as a historian who's always like, that's not right. Especially he'll get into Game of Thrones, all that kind of stuff. It's different. But in the books, it's crazy, because in the end, he actually goes back to the Shire, and the Shire is in ruin, like he had seen when he was with the elves. That actually happens in the books. And so the hobbits don't go untouched from everything, which in the movie, they're in this sweet little place, a bubble of the
it
Shire,
never gets there.
Yeah, which
but in the books it does.
It does. And it's really harsh and really much more impacting when you think of just these pleasant people who all they wanted to do was garden and drink and smoke some weed. And here they are being destroyed, and they have to come and clean that up at the end of the books.
Truthfully, I felt like on my rewatch, I felt like that was too easy. I knew that had to be too easy. I was like, that just doesn't
look.
I mean, it's
he just falls and it's done. And
oh no, I just mean like that it was too the Shire not getting touched. Like that was too easy of a
Mhm.
story piece.
Yeah. Well, the movie already has 5
That
endings.
string.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's part of it too. I mean, that's part when you take something so massive and you've got
And
to
I get it, but
finish it up.
I watched it. I'm like, this is too easy.
There's more.
This gets deeper. Like, you can't just get to this whole thing. And these guys just almost didn't even know like that it happened.
We can talk about it more offline because there are some other things that
Anyway.
are pretty jarring that are different.
Oh yeah.
Like order of things basically from Helm's Deep on in the films. Pretty different than the
Okay.
books.
That wasn't a very lightning round.
Yeah,
what's
not in the lightning
What's
round.
your next question?
Do you have a favorite line? Because there are so many great ones.
Oh, I mean, I think I already said it. Mountains, Gandalf. Like that's just because I say it in an everyday phrase, but there's always that opening, and maybe it's part of the music playing in it too. But when she says, "I feel it in the air," and it's just this settling that starts everything off. I knew something with the line was going to come up, but
I mean, Mountains Gandalf is a good one.
It's just, it always comes up anytime I see him. It's what pops out of my mouth. So
Regan?
if anything's going to be a phrase, it's that.
If I had more time, I actually was going to go and like look up a bunch of the lines, because as I'm watching these, I'm like,
there's so many
I gotta
great
remember
ones.
that. Oh, I gotta remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say the one that hit me, like, aside from the I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. It's in the Fellowship of the Ring, where Sam, Frodo's trying to get away before Sam like realizes it for like the first of 5 times. And he's running in the water, and he's I'm probably gonna mess it up now, but he was like, I made a promise, Mr. Frodo, a promise, Gandalf, whatever, he quotes him. He says, "Don't you leave him. Don't you leave him."
They're in the
Samwise
cornfield.
Gamgee.
Yeah.
And he's like,
and I intend not to.
And I intend not to, or whatever the actual line is. But that hit me in the feels when I was watching it. I was home by myself, and tears start rolling.
I have 3.
It's the definition of loyalty.
Yeah, absolutely. Mine are not nearly as good as that. Yours has meaning. Mine doesn't.
No, there's plenty of other funny ones, and like there's plenty of lines. But.
I have 1 in each film. 1, Fool of a Took. It's the best insult. Yeah, it's just great.
Every time he says it.
2, I Come to You Now at the Turning of the Tide. Boss move. Love that line. Gandalf showing up and being like, "It's all about the change. I'm back."
White.
Yeah.
Here to stay.
Great. And then You Bow to No One makes like literally I'm going to cry thinking about it. It gets me every time. Yep. And a lot of that's just the power of that scene. Like it's staged really well. It's really beautiful. Viggo Mortensen.
Now, I'll tell you.
So handsome.
Oh, go ahead. Oh yeah, that really gets you. Yeah, the crown. And he's all clean. He took a bath.
He took
really
a bath. His hair's in a ponytail. He looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you though, I did write down my favorite moment as a musician as far as the film is concerned, and that culmination. And that is the moment that they're at Minas Tirith, and you hear it's a melody that comes in for the Grey Havens. And it's one of the songs that like, I don't know if it's Enya or not that sings it, but it's a theme that comes back in when Frodo and Bilbo go to the Grey Havens at the end of the movies. And it's just this deep da 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 dee da 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 da. And it's done in this really deep like cello and bass sound. And it's about them finishing that journey and him closing that book and saying his goodbyes and telling Sam, like, you have the rest of your life to live. Like, I've finished my burden here and taking that with me, and you have another chapter. And it's the closing of it all, but it's also the same theme that comes in when Gandalf is there talking to Pippin. And it's like that last moment before the battle, and they go, not knowing if Frodo's made it or not. And he tells them basically like, this is the dawning of a new age. This is the clearing when you see like heaven almost opening up to Gandalf is describing that to him. And it's just a beautiful score moment that ties in with what's happening there. And always that theme just wrenches on my heart. I will listen to that over and over again. Love, 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 love.
This was my next question, actually. Score moment. Do you have it?
Can we play it?
I mean, I could try to put it on. There may be I don't think there's enough listeners for us to get in copyright trouble.
Let's listen to it now. Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah,
oh
beautiful.
man, that was so beautiful.
I really just love the Shire theme, because to me that music, the whole score is perfect. I'm not trying to single out anything, but that musical moment perfectly captures the feeling the Shire is supposed to give you.
Oh yeah,
Like it
it comes back.
yes.
Grasps you and reminds you of that. And I think Regan, well, I know that we had mentioned on Facebook this when you're talking about how perfect it goes, like just to kind of nerd out in a musical sense, like we were talking about the orcs. He used this 5/4 time to really make you feel uneasy because it's not something we hear often. And you put weird beats of boom, 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 and it's really jarring. And it's
play the actual.
That's just yeah. It's just genius. I mean, it's something that goes below the surface. If you don't know what that technique is, you wouldn't even feel it, but you know what it is, and it's there, and it's haunting, and it's intense, and those moments just elevate that intensely. And I have to shout out to my husband who convinced his football team to like use that as their like music when they're coming out of the tunnel for one season. I was like, yes, this is so cool. You have no idea. They have no idea, these children.
That's great. Yeah. I don't know what moment it is, but it's the one that runs like throughout the whole thing to me that just
Yeah.
Oh, and that violin sound too. It's a really specific violin they use for that too. So it's even like a different tone that you're probably even used to hearing as a Western listener. Like that's something that's really interesting. I even looked that up. I remember hearing it the first time, what type of instrument that was. And the same instrument with like the Rohan, da 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 bum bum bum. That sound.
It just plays. He uses it for
genius
different places, and it's just it hits to the core every time. And then at the end, I think it's at the end when Aragorn's singing. What's he singing? I can't even do it right now, but because I don't know the words, it's Elvish. I'm pretty sure, but
yeah, probably 99.9% sure it's Elvish.
Yeah, and when I'm listening to the soundtrack, anytime that comes on, I'm just like I'm swept away from whatever I'm working on at the moment.
Yeah.
I love that they added a lot more of his Elvish into the movies when they did the extended versions and some of the songs and stuff that was already in the text to that. So it's a nice touch.
My final two questions are, and they're I think much easier to answer: extended or theatrical?
Extended, although I will caveat that with saying that I appreciate the extended. But I'm always going to be a traditionalist. So when the extended version comes up, it doesn't always feel natural.
I only watch the extended now.
I don't think I've seen the extended.
I have
just
them
watched
on
it on HBO Max, and it didn't give me the option.
I don't think they have it on HBO Max.
Have you ever watched it with commentary?
I have.
I might have watched the first one.
It's a whole nother beast, I feel like.
No, I
almost thought about doing it this time. I was like, I just don't have the mental capacity right now.
I definitely will next time, because I love doing that, especially for movies like this that are so rich and so deep in there, even rich and deep in the making of.
Yeah.
Like
well, you find out some fun stuff too, like when the firework goes off at Bilbo's party, you actually hear the actor screaming. It's not the firework, so that nice high-pitched sound is I think Merry or Pippin screaming, one of the two of them. And then there's one scene where you can actually see one of them farts and parts their hair when they fall on each other, when they fall down the mountain. That's and they're funny. Trying to run from the Nazgul. Yeah, good times.
Vigo
listen to commentary.
Huh?
Yeah.
Vigo breaking his foot.
Yeah.
Final question, and this one's very personal to me. You got depending the answer you pick will depend on whether or not I like you as a human being or not.
Man, no pressure.
Uh-oh.
Rohan or Gondor?
Oh, Rohan.
Thank you. Yes, that is the right response.
Wow.
Rohan. Yeah, all the way. And like,
yeah,
I went to Mount Sunday where they filmed that. Utterly impressive location, but they're a strong horse people fighting like it always bothers me in the movies when you get to Gondor and you're dealing with him like pouring oil all over and he's burning himself and dude, what is wrong with you? Like, this is your own problem. You don't even have worm tongue here. Like, it's just No, I'm all for the Rohan all the way. Like they are much more impressive people and story to me. Gondor is just that sad, withering tree,
Yeah.
waiting for rescue there.
I feel like there's a whole game series there, honestly.
And Rohan?
The history of Rohan. There should be.
Yeah.
For sure.
I do have a question, speaking of, but go ahead.
I was going to say, I find that book readers prefer Rohan. Movie watchers only prefer Gondor. Because Gondor is the shining city on a hill.
Yeah.
But
they don't do it.
But the Horse Lords, man, it's just...
They don't do it.
Yeah,
that
they don't.
culture is so rich and so good. And look, I mean, I know you say they don't do it justice, but I would argue that I think they do capture the look and feel really well. And I think too many people separate Helm's Deep from Rohan. They look at the Helm's Deep fights, the battle scene, and they're like, "This is such a great moment." But that's part of that story, and that's part of their culture and all of that. You know, when they getting to the point where they just decide, you know what, like we believe Gandalf is coming, but live or die, we are not dying in here. Yeah. We are dying out there in the battlefield. That's Rohan.
Huge. Yeah,
and
twice.
That just culture. I get really. This is a very important question, if you guys can tell from me.
Yeah.
Are you a horse person?
I'm not,
but
it's cool.
Okay, all right.
But I appreciate the culture that Tolkien established with Rohan more than I do with Gondor. Even though, you know, gotta love the Numenors and much love to Aragorn, but
yeah, there's just I feel strongly pulled to Rohan, and I'm not a horse person much either. But like you said, the history there and the way that they're built in the books, and just these, I have a great love of animals, and so their connection to their horses as being their masters, but also like really working together with their animals, I always have a respect for, and all the way.
You did name your D&D character Theoden.
I did. Yep, so that's part of it. It really is. So I comment and then question to follow that. What I have found interesting is over all of this time that Lord of the Rings has existed, I still feel like there's so much more storytelling potential because of what he built in terms of building out that world and that history just to tell the stories that we do get. That I'm honestly just rather surprised that we haven't, like, to relate it to Star Wars. Star Wars, once it came out and the expanded universe became this thing, and so many books spawned off of Star Wars. And I get that Lord of the Rings was a book first, so maybe that's part of it. But there's
and I think you and I are really going to differ on this point, because I'm really not a fan of doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, to me, and that's kind of one thing while I was looking up, like, where's Lord of the Rings going in the future and what's happening. And I don't want Lord of the Rings to become the next Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't want it. And it's kind of crazy. I know there's tons of Star Wars literature out there, and I'm way more an amateur in that field than you are. But I really don't want Tolkien to be picked apart for like every little side note he put, and like, where can that go? And I don't know. I have had so many series get ruined for me when they do that, like The Witcher and the Sword of Truth series that I loved, and then I got so excited and they put it up and was so utterly disappointed. I think I'm just so scared of that happening again.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know,
but it's good. I mean,
there's so much there. At least there's like thousands of years you could go into.
It's true though. I mean, not doing it keeps it in tight, keeps it enclosed, keeps it protected, and keeps it richness without
safe,
spoiling it. But the question to that, I can't remember if we've ever talked about this or not, but the video games, I do feel like they've done a good job for the most part in the few games that they've done that do branch out as side stories. I know you're a big gamer. Have you played any of those, or do you have any experience with those, or what are your thoughts?
My husband has played Shadow of Mordor, and I have not, but I'm a big fan of watching my husband play games. Like, he will watch me, just like watching a movie kind of. But what I've watched him play, I've utterly enjoyed, and I just haven't played it because I am trying to finish a Primal game. And so I'm very much the person who I have to start and stop one thing, and then I will turn my plate and eat the next food kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I get done, I finished The Witcher and then I went on to the next thing. And so once I get done with my game, it's definitely on the list of games. But what I've seen, I loved, absolutely loved.
Yeah.
I thought it was very well done.
No, they are, and I think they are a good sidestep. So it doesn't touch on any of the main story. Now they did also do. I can't remember the name of it now. It was a side story, as a multiplayer game on Xbox 360. So before a lot of the massive online stuff was really a thing for everybody. And it's like truly a side thing that goes right along with the main story.
Yeah, I remember.
Cool.
And I think it's cool because it adds some richness without totally like having to get in the
Throwing
way
it to the wind.
of all the other stuff. So it's kind of like you get well, this was going on over here. This other thing was happening. I think is neat. It wasn't so deep that to your point, it wasn't like spoiling the richness of that lore, but it was enough to kind of like play in that sandbox and have a good time with a very basic game of that style.
Well, I know like they're throwing around. I couldn't find anything that was like absolute of what their storyline was going to be for anything. Amazon taking on Lord of the Rings and doing a TV series. Nothing's in stone as far as story. There's some talk of like a younger Aragorn, and I just put down like so angsty next to my note. It's like I don't want to be king.
Was he doing? Was a ranger.
It's there's some interesting points, and I'm just so a traditionalist. I get really protective of that, But again, I don't feel like it needs moving as of yet. I don't feel like we need to make another Spider-Man out of it. I like where it sits right now. Let it be, as Enya says. Let it be.
That was a serious.
We normally ask what a critique a person has for it, that thing or property. It sounds like you just gave it.
That was it right there.
I want to revisit this world and I want to see these things, but I just don't trust the product we're going to get. And so it's probably safer to not do it.
Leave it to the imagination. It's fun to do that.
I looked up Amazon and I just couldn't. I looked up what they've done and I could not find something on there that I was like, oh.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so that's the only reason, it can get into different hands, and it really does depend on what the production crew's intentions are and the TV, whoever's putting it on. It's all about those intentions and who is involved, because what we saw as kids very well could have been a horrible representation and wasn't. But that I think also comes with the fact that they filmed them all at the same time. It wasn't done in random bits and pieces. Like it was all one cohesive thing from the beginning. And I think that you just, when you sell it off, then you run the risk of somebody just kind of taking it and running. And it's always, it's crazy when someone takes your baby, you want to make sure they take care of it.
I'll say this, if they do it with the intention of making their version of Game of Thrones, it's dead.
Yeah. See, that's my problem.
Right.
I don't want something to be a ripoff. See, and when Game of Thrones came out, the first season is not really a high budget fantasy spectacle. If you go back and watch season 1 of Game of Thrones and then watch season 2, it's like two different shows. Like the budget, they were like, oh, we have something here. And all of a sudden Tyrion doesn't have a bad wig.
Those curls are tight.
Yeah. It hadn't been done, so nobody and the same thing's true for Lord of the Rings when the movies came out. There hadn't been a big fantasy epic that had really done well on the big screen in a long time, and so it was remarkable that Peter Jackson did it. And then Game of Thrones kind of does the same thing on TV, and we can discuss where Game of Thrones goes. But
whole nother podcast.
The want to replicate what it achieved, at the very least for the first 4 or 5 seasons, is not a good starting point for artistic vision.
Right.
And look, I mean, I've read the Witcher books, and the first season of the Witcher, I don't hate, I don't love. It is what it is. It feels
the book was not great to begin with, and that was their fault, I think, in following the Witcher's original storyline, because it was written as something to go into a contest, not as like a formative book. And so they should have made the artistic decision, in my opinion, to correct the timeline and make it clear to the audience what the hell is happening.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Definitely timeline is the biggest concern with the Witcher series. That's the most confusing if you're out on the outside looking in, I think.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But it feels like Game of Thrones. There's a lot of like black leather and, large broadswords and
they try to do their version.
And maybe to an extent that's just true for fantasy tropes. That one specifically Game of Thrones because it's adult. Like it's, it's R-rated kind of like Game of Thrones is. I just don't want that for Lord of the Rings. I don't want
it. Well, and I don't think you need that. I really don't. I mean, there was so much that was there before Game of Thrones expanded into what it became that, like you said, when you start worrying about ratings and how much money you're throwing into it, like that's when the creative process goes to crap because you're not worried about storyline. You're worried, how can we wrap this up? We only have so much budget. We have one more season, eight episodes, which was ridiculous to try and shove that all into, whatever number of episodes that was in the last season. But that was such a, clean it up and get it done kind of job. It's sad.
Yeah. It's, it'll be interesting.
A lot of feelings there.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see in a few years where we're at.
Yeah. Well, and we'll see when we get our actual final books, what the actual ending may be.
So the last thing is what does the future hold? Where do you think, I mean, we kind of talked about the new shows coming out, but how do you think that Lord of the Rings is going to stay engaged with new generations?
I think it's kind of interesting. Regan, I think you were the one that mentioned it earlier about seeing, or maybe Christian was, I don't know, who said about going to go see the score live, the music score live?
You said you went and saw it.
That's a movies. College version of it.
Oh, it was college. Okay. That's something I think they are so involved in, like I had mentioned, New Zealand as a country is actually really involved in keeping Lord of the Rings alive as like a tourist industry. And I think that partnership is wonderful. I mean, the Hobbiton set is still fully functioning. It's a fully functioning garden that go ahead. They handle all the food and beverages for the Green Dragon. I'm sure they can't handle all of it, but they still grow stuff for the table and for the beverages there. And you walk in and there's still people tending the apple trees and stuff. I just want to continue to see that partnership. And I think things like, people going to go see movie scores live, something that I'm really missing as we're kind of in lockdown right now is experiences like that. Just going out to a symphony and enjoying it in that way. I'm interested to see where Amazon goes with it. I hope it goes well. I honestly, I like the games and I want them to be preserved through the books and through people continuing to share them. I just don't want it to be like, let's have a new movie series anytime soon. I don't know. I'm very cautious about the Amazon thing, if it goes well or not. I'm one of those people. I don't want you to touch it. I want you to leave it. It's going fine.
Amen.
But just passing it down. Pass it down to your kiddos.
Well, I think that's where we have to call it. This has by far been our longest conversation. Again, so far, I've been saying this a lot that these are things that I'm also into. This is the thing that of all the things I'm probably the most into, and I can really get in the weeds and talk about the symbolism and all that stuff. And I'm doing my best to refrain because we'd be here all night.
Maybe go on and on.
Maybe we'll do a part 2,
a sequel
down the road.
Yeah.
All in Elvish on you, Regan. Okay.
Oh yeah,
Start studying. I'll learn something in Elvish. How about that?
But Stephanie, I appreciate you hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Is there anything you want to promote? I don't know. We normally let people say what they got going on, but
I don't have anything to promote. I'm just sitting at home working and watching Netflix. That's what I'm doing with life right now.
Cool. Props to that.
I hope y'all are having a good one.
I am. I watched a lot of anime today while working, so
I watched
it's a good day.
Anime.
So
there you go.
You finished up your homework.
Yeah, onward to The Hobbit.
Unexpected journey. Here you come. That's what we're calling. I think that's the. But yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to Fantastic People. Please rate and subscribe wherever you find your podcast, and follow us on social media. That's at Fantastic People Pod on Facebook, at Fantastic_People Pod on Instagram, and at Fantastic People, no E, on Twitter. We'd like to say thank you to Alex Edmondson for our artwork, and we hope to see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.